Myanmar political leader Aung San Suu Kyi has been reportedly moved to house arrest after spending 5 years in prison. The military junta that ousted her civilian government has shared a photo of Ms Suu Kyi on state media claiming to show her out of prison. The 80-year-old remains hugely popular in Myanmar, and the 2021 coup leaders who jailed her have been widely condemned by the UN and the international community. Her son, Kim Aris, has called for the unconditional release of his mother. And Professor Sean Turnell is an Australian economist who was Aung San Suu Kyi's senior economic policy advisor, a role that led to him being jailed there in 2021. And he joins us now from Sydney. Sean Turnell, welcome. So are you confident that Aung San Suu Kyi has actually been released from prison and into house arrest?
I'm confident that she's been moved, Joe. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, that she's been moved into house arrest. The regime is saying that, but we've got no real proof of life, let alone that her changed circumstances. But yeah, so I think she's been moved, but exactly where is still a little unclear.
And put this in a bit of context for us. What is the PR offensive that the junta is on right now?
Yeah, so the junta is trying to normalise relations to many countries around the world. They ran a so-called election a few months ago, which was just a complete farce, but they're somewhat hopeful that this will, repair diplomatic relations, etc. It hasn't worked at all, so this is really their latest offensive on that front.
Yeah, so you think this is definitely kind of associated with that?
Oh, absolutely. And it's out of their old playbook. They've done this many, many times. They don't really do any real reforms, any real change to policy. The atrocities continue. The economy is tanked. All the real stuff remains the same. But they do this sort of thing. They release prisoners every now and then. And this should be seen in that context.
And you spent a long time in the prison that Aung San Suu Kyi was being held in. Give us an insight into how bad conditions are in there.
Yeah, so I spent nearly 2 years only about 100 metres away from her, and the conditions were just terrible. The prison was built over 100 years ago. It's a terrible place. It's sort of like an archetype of a medieval prison. Concrete walls, rusty old iron bars, the cells all open to the elements, open to the creatures that come in, rats and spiders and scorpions, all that sort of stuff. Suu Kyi had a cell, as I say, just a few 100 metres from me, a little bit better than the normal cell because it would be built especially for her to keep her away from the other prisoners, but still pretty dreadful. And, she's over 80 years old now. The weather in Myanmar is very severe, of course. And so, yeah, the conditions she's been under are really pretty bad.
Did you have any contact with her when you were in jail?
I sure did, because we were on trial together. So allegedly, I was her spy handler. I was the agent pulling the strings behind the scenes. So we were put on a charge together. So I saw her every week when we were on trial for well over a year. This farcical trial went on for over a year. So I saw her every week. Of course, it had exactly the expected outcome. In Myanmar, if you get charged, you will be found guilty. And we were both found guilty of essentially espionage.
And how was she holding up when you were in there?
Oh, incredibly well. In fact, in many ways, she was sort of in her element, because she's renowned for her strength and resilience against the most terrible circumstances. And so she maintained that throughout the whole period. As I say, I spent nearly 2 years with her in the prison. I think her biggest concern was to keep the morale up of the rest of us, and it worked to a certain extent.
Yeah, but no one has actually none of her friends or legal representatives have actually communicated with her for the last at least 2 years?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we don't really have definitive proof of life for over 2 years now. So this is why, many of her supporters, obviously her son Kim, as you mentioned earlier, really campaigning for some sort of definitive proof that she's okay. And the fact that, they're claiming she's been moved in under house arrest, but so far no definitive picture or any other proof of life has been presented And I think we've got to really ask ourselves why that might be the case. What exactly are they trying to hide? Is her condition what they're worried about? Are they worried about the rest of the world, people in Myanmar really reacting to pictures of her that, might show her ill treatment?
And so how important is it that she is released?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. Of course, there's 20,000 other political prisoners in Myanmar, of which she's, just the first among equals in a sense. So it's important for them all to be released for any sort of genuine change in Myanmar to be real.
And so this would be an important moment in her long story. Aung San Suu Kyi was for a long time a favourite of the international human rights community because of her long struggle for democracy, but that reputation suffered with her personal defence of the army's actions in an International Court of Justice hearing on a genocide case. What's your perspective on her actions then?
Yeah, I've always maintained, Joe, that her actions are misunderstood. She was very much trying to get some sort of leverage over the military. She was trying to actually gradually ease them out. The whole constitutional framework was set up such that the military remained totally in control of any of the security agencies. They had control over their own budget. Their actions really couldn't be questioned by the civilian government. So my interpretation of that whole episode was that, in a sense, she made a very pragmatic call of trying to be able to, as I say, get some sort of leverage over the military and change the situation for the long term. One could argue about, whether it worked or not, and in the end, of course, it did, because the military still came in anyway. But I think her motives were pure, even if, we might worry about how it turned out in practice.
And so what then is the ongoing situation in Myanmar when it comes to human rights and democracy?
Oh, just awful. It's probably at its lowest ever, quite frankly. And the country's been, under military rule for the best part of 60 years. But, the human rights abuses are off the scale. There's continued bombing from the air of defenceless villages and so on. I mentioned, there's 20,000 political prisoners still. There's conscription. The economy is more or less completely collapsed and poverty is widespread. So, this place that, say, 5, 10 years ago was really looking like it was going places. It looked like it was going to catch up to the other tiger economies of Asia. And now, once again, it's a basket case, whether it be on the economic front or on the human rights front.
It's been written that Aung San Suu Kyi is still incredibly popular in Myanmar. Do you think her release could spark any renewed push towards democracy by her supporters?
It could, and I think that's what the military really feared. Because the big fact, I think, in all of this is that the military are terrified of this 80-year-old lady. She has such a deep hold, deeply respected by the Burmese people. They know they're incredibly unpopular. And I think whenever they deal with her in any way, they're just worried where things might go. But fear and insecurity is the overriding motive, I think, behind this regime in Myanmar.
And Sean Turnell, I want to ask you as well just how you're going personally after spending so long in that terrible prison. How has life been for you settling back into Australia?
Australia is one of those places that I think can solve most things, Joe. So life here in Sydney is wonderful. So, I just rejoice every day that I'm free. I feel terribly sorry for Aung San Suu Kyi and all of my Burmese friends, many of them political prisoners. So I think about them all the time. But my personal circumstances here in Sydney is just an understanding that I live in part of a paradise of the world, I think.
Indeed. Okay, Sean Turnell, thanks so much for talking to us from Sydney.